Welcome to PsychSessions AI, a podcast dedicated to discussing the impacts of AI on the field of psychology. My name is Joe Slade, and I study AI, teaching, and learning at Oregon State University. Let's dive in. Welcome, everyone, to PsychSessions AI. Today, we're joined by Guy Boysen. Dr. Boysen is a professor of psychology at McKendree University, whose primary areas of research include mental illness stigma and the scholarship of teaching and learning. Dr. Boysen has served on the editorial board of multiple journals on the scholarship of teaching. He's the author of Becoming a Psychology Professor and co-author of An Evidence-Based Guide to College and University Teaching. Guy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I wonder if you could tell us maybe a little bit more about your role at your university, and I understand that you're associate editor for Teaching of Psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems weird to say, but I'm now the senior person in my department. I still feel like I just got out of grad school, but yeah. So I'm a professor, and I've got three other colleagues. So McKendree's, even though it says university, it's a small teaching-focused college. And we really emphasize teaching first, and so that's part of the reason that I do most of my research on teaching, and why I love being involved with the editorial process at the journals. So my roles at my university is very teaching focused as well. So I'm the long-standing, it's almost a joke at my university, the long-standing chair of our assessment committee. And I also am what we call a provost fellow for assessment. And what that basically means is, everyone for accreditation and for just general improvement has to assess student learning. And so the committee I'm in charge of is sort of advises on teaching, but then also on assessment. And then that administrative position is kind of like, I'm the person that you submit your assessment reports to. So that makes me the very popular person on campus, as people I think just 2 weeks ago had a little assessment report to, even though it was summer, to submit to me. And so, yeah, so, that assessment provost fellow role also involves kind of training people on campus as their teachers. So I'm involved with the sort of the mentorship of new faculty members as they come in. So we teach them some of the basics of the university and good teaching. And then it's also, we have a lot of professional development on our campus related to teaching. So part of my role is to be sort of active in that. So I'm almost always on the schedule whenever we do any type of professional development, talking about something. It could be some of the stuff that I've done research on. It could be artificial intelligence, anything that's a sort of a hot topic. I end up doing some professional development for. And yeah, so it goes quite well with my editorial stuff. So how many years ago now? I think when I was just starting out in 2006 as a professor, I sent an email to Drew Christopher at Teaching of Psych and said, "Hey, do you need some reviewing, someone to review some articles?" And he was like, "I sure do." And I got articles nonstop for a very long time, and eventually got sort of an associate editor or consulting editor, whatever it's called, there. And then when Aaron Richmond, who I did some research and some work with, took over, he asked me to jump on the editorial staff there. So that's one of the more enjoyable parts of my job, I think, is, if I could just sit around and read and edit journal articles all day, and maybe not edit's kind of tough because you have to make a decision, but just like evaluating them and giving feedback on them, that's just fun. That's just fun reading that stuff and doing it. So so that's kind of an answer to those first two questions.
Yeah, and a lot of ways we could take it, but maybe we could start with your role, your assessment role, and your faculty development role, and how AI has begun to change that, and how you lead those kind of sessions and your mentoring.
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing that's happening right now is just people trying to figure out what to do. And so as the school year ended, we have multiple professional development, opportunities at my institution. So we have one that's right after the semester ends, that's about kind of the assessment and trying to figure out what information to take from assessment. So part of that was we did two major surveys on my campus, one of students that was kind of run by students as a class project about how they're using AI and kind of what they think about it. And then I've done one for a couple of years of faculty about kind of policy and what they know and what they need. And so just kind of gathering some basic information. And so there are a few people on campus who really have jumped in and have adopted. And there are a few people on campus who are like, I'm not doing any of it. And then there's a bunch of people in the middle. The next thing that we had was a professional development kind of teaching workshop. And, a good 25% of the sessions there were about AI. And people just kind of I think they need to understand what they can do with AI because they're not necessarily, unless they're reading the latest journals, which a lot of them don't have time to do, they're not really getting ideas about how they should be using it. And there's really a lot of focus on how do I keep students from cheating? And I think maybe this year, finally, from this professional development, things have kind of shifted a little bit toward just like kind of the cop stuff. How do I enforce? How do I prevent students? And just shifted just a little bit. I think we've got a core set of faculty after our professional development who are maybe a little bit more excited about incorporating it into teaching. And that's something I'm got that administrative position, but man, I tell you, I'm still not entirely certain I know it is what all the answers are. So I'm learning with them to be sure, even though I'm kind of a step ahead of them because I've been thinking about it maybe a year longer than a lot of our faculty. But yeah, so it's not going to end. So, we're already kind of planning, for our fall teaching in service stuff. Like what's that going to look like? How are we going to talk about AI with that? So yeah, it's a major part of everything we're doing with professional development right now.
Are there any results from either of those surveys that you'd be able to share or?
Sure. I actually pulled it up. So I don't have the student one at my fingertips, but I can just kind of say, the first thing we did in terms of policy on campus, led by our provost, was, and I think this is true of a lot of places, we need to have policy in teachers' syllabi. We're not going to tell you what that policy is, but you need it. And we're about at 90% right now, full-time faculty who have a very clear set syllabus policy. And that's a jump of over 10% from last year. So the message is out there that you can't, if you're going to hold students responsible for any use of AI, you need to have a policy in there. And I think the results also show that faculty are really they're mixing and matching policies. We actually don't have almost anyone who's just like, use AI, do whatever you want. There's maybe a few of them. And we have maybe a quarter who are in the no AI at all. But what's most common is a mix, right? You can use it for some stuff and you can't use it for others. And this wasn't part of the survey, but I think it's the general idea that if you're interfering with learning, then you should not be using it for that purpose. Yeah, so I think that's where they're at with policies. And then, one of the biggest changes that happened in the last year is basically last year, all people were doing is saying, here's my policy. So that's like, 85% of teachers are saying, this is how I deal with AI in my class. And the biggest shift we saw is this year, we had a triple the amount of people are actually demonstrating AI tools in class. And there's also a bigger jump by about 10% of people saying, I'm actually incorporating assignments. And I'd expect that to be even more dramatic. So we'll still talk about policy, but I think more and more people are actually doing stuff with it. And what are some of the other big ones? Um, People are learning about AI through basically their colleagues and through personal experimentation. There's really not a huge chunk of people who are getting it from journal articles yet, and like professional conferences yet. That might have something to do with like how professional development happens at our college. And the in terms of on a 5-point scale from not at all familiar to extremely familiar with AI technologies, our faculty is exactly in the middle with a 3.0, literally. So they feel moderately. So we don't have a huge chunk of people who feel they have a lot of expertise, but they're moving that way.
And I wonder if that's like a bimodal distribution or if it is kind of uniform. I'd expect it to be more bimodal, with a lot of people saying, yeah, I use it all the time, and some people saying never use it at all. Or what in your experience?
Yeah, no, I think there's kind of people right in the middle who are using it a little bit on our campus at least. And then there's a few people who are early adopters. So we have, just we've got like a teaching listserv email list at my campus. And I don't know, people have too much time on their hands in the summer. Maybe I made the mistake of sending out an article about, teaching with AI on it. And it immediately prompted basically a nonstop debate between, not a debate, but like stuff basically about between one of our computer science faculty and then also one of our philosophers who have been super hardcore early adopters of AI. And so they've been sending out all of this stuff and having these very high level debates on this email listserv. So we've got people like that. And then we also have a few people who are just like, I haven't done anything with it. I don't know what it is. It scares me. And there are a few people as well who also have objections. So at this teaching workshop we did with about AI, it definitely did come up, the idea of what are we doing to the environment with AI. And then it also came up with, why are we allowing kind of corporations to tell us what we should be doing in our class? So kind of that idea that these are just big companies looking for ways to make money, and they're just going to foist this AI on us, and it's just going to be a profit for them, and it's not helping us. So so we have some critics and some early adopters. So.
And I guess in your assessment role, what exactly does that entail? Are you looking at like student grades and that kind of thing, and how things have changed over time, assessment strategies, like different? Mm-hmm.
Not so much grading, but more so the type of stuff that you have to that you would have to keep track of and document for accreditation agencies. So, we're on we have the Higher Learning Commission is our accreditation agency. And so, what to keep our accreditation, basically, we not only have to assess our learning goals at an institution level, but we have to show that we're engaging in continuous improvement based on the outcomes of that assessment. That's kind of intense if you think about it. And so we have a committee on campus that I'm the chair of, and then I kind of have double duty because I also have I have a role as an assessment administrator as well. So I kind of wear multiple hats related to assessment at my institution. But yeah, so it's more like, just to use a simple example, we have a learning objective at the institution level that students will be able to communicate effectively in written and oral ways. So how do we know that they're doing that? Well, one of the things that we did is we got universal public speaking and writing rubrics that we've adopted at our institution. And so we use those in our first year composition courses to see, how the student writing stacks up on that rubric. And then we also use it we have writing intensive courses. So for example, I teach a senior thesis course where they write their senior projects up, and I use that rubric to assess them. And so, that's kind of the level of assessment. So, and it can be indirect stuff as well. So we do student surveys to see whether they feel like they've learned and, whether they kind of have ethical responsibilities and personal responsibilities. And so, a committee is basically responsible for looking at that at the institutional level. And then every major also does assessment to see whether their individual learning goals. So we have, you know, APA goals that we adopted in our psych program, and every 2 years we submit a report to this committee that I chair. It's weird when you think about it. Right? I'm submitting a report on assessment to myself from myself, which is, I don't know what that means, but so every couple of years we submit saying whether we have a whole plan that we institute related to the APA undergrad learning outcomes, and so it's just about kind of not so much about the grading, the evaluation, but about whether students are meeting the expectations. So it's all about, if you're doing it right, it's all about learning and reflecting on what you're doing educationally and trying to figure out if you're being successful at it.
And you mentioned that you're teaching a thesis course. Have you noticed any differences in student writing over these last 2-3 years? With AI specifically, what I'm referring to?
I think that I have. And I think that this is, some of it is a little bit, it's confounded with my increase over time and really, really, really hitting home process writing. So getting at drafts and drafts and drafts and peer review, and then I give them feedback and so on. But I used to spend so much time giving students feedback on basic writing mistakes. Going way back more than a decade, I used to even have, basically, this is when people were still turning in paper copies of papers. I don't read paper copies anymore. That went away with the pandemic. But I used to have in my syllabus, and I took this from the APS Observer. I forget who actually wrote this up, but like shorthand editorial symbols. Like, I put this symbol on your paper and it means that you have this mistake. This means you need to improve clarity. Like I used to literally have in my syllabus, here's the feedback. And I just don't give that feedback anymore. Again, part of it is my philosophy. Like, I try and make it so that students aren't giving that to me. But I 100% believe that another part of it is that whether I ask them to or not, they're using Grammarly or other forms of AI. Obviously, Word and Google Docs have automatic kind of feedback as well that they give students or give writers. But yeah, I feel like that level of feedback just doesn't really happen anymore. And if a student turns in something to me that has a bunch of basic writing mistakes, I wonder what the heck the problem was that they didn't actually check it using some sort of writing feedback. So that's the biggest thing I've seen. And I think I am sure that some students are overusing AI, but because I kind of take this very much a process approach, I'm not seeing a lot of work that I think is fully written by AI. I have not turned in a lot of students for cheating. And maybe I'm a little naive, but yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. You said that you haven't had to give that kind of feedback. Is that because you haven't had to? Because the quality of the initial submissions has been better?
Yeah, in my observations, I just do not see the very basic stuff of grammar and punctuation, the errors that I once saw and thought were like the worst part about my job is having to read these papers that haven't been proofread. I just feel like the papers now have been proofread by someone else or by AI. I don't really think that student writing has gotten better. Like, I don't think the papers are that much better or the content of them is significantly better. So I do not think it's like a change in the students and their abilities per se. I do think it's just a change in the how they're producing them. Um, and it relates to teaching with AI, that AAUNP book that came out. Kind of, and I don't know where this originated, but this idea that, C work is now failing level work, if you think about it, because AI can produce a C level paper. And so now students are basically going to have to be held to higher expectations. And, going back to that assessment thing, that writing rubric that we use at our institution, like, all they have to do is run something through AI and they can have the highest score in terms of syntax and grammar, which is one of the performance indicators on there. So that I was part of the creation of that rubric about a decade ago. Well, yeah, about a decade ago. And we're probably going to have to revise it because it doesn't really make sense anymore to really be evaluating, students for their ability to write grammatically, because it's all grammatical, I think, because they're getting feedback, whether they know it or not, through AI, because they're using Grammarly or they're using the automatic stuff that Word does for you.
What do you say to those students who choose not to use AI and who do turn in like a terrible draft or get low grades because of it? It's terrible.
I don't, if a student turns in a terrible draft, I don't tell them they turned in a terrible draft. My philosophy, it does still happen. So I won't say that every single student does that, but I wish I could give credit to, I think this was, I think I know where I got this from, but I don't want to falsely credit anything, so I won't say it. But it's not my original idea. Is when a student turns in something and I'm constantly, missing a comma, typo, I'll do that for one paragraph. And then the final comment at the end of that paragraph is edit the rest of the paper for these types of mistakes. And so I think at one point in my career, I would make those editorial changes or suggestions or comments throughout entire papers, and that was not a good use of my time. Eventually, I kind of figured out that the students should be making all of those. So I've never like, well, that's not true. I think I have actually told a few students, maybe you should use a little bit, run this through AI. And that actually is the first assignment that I have incorporated into my courses related to artificial intelligence. Is over the last year, I have actually required students to, instead of having their first draft be me or peer review, their first draft is an AI draft where they run their assignment through AI. So it's not creating anything, it's not writing anything for them. It's just basically they ask for feedback, and that could be grammatical, it could be APA style, it could be flow or organization. And so I actually have just starting a scholarship of teaching project to kind of analyze that first year of data on their use of it. So I've never had a student refuse, and I've never had a student really show any concern about that. Some of them clearly are going through the motions and just kind of doing the minimum with it, either for motivation purposes or because they don't trust it. I'm not sure. But if they turn in those types of papers, it's usually just because they procrastinated and they're turning in something at the last minute, and I know that. So I adjust my feedback accordingly because it's not ready for feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, how are you going to be able to distinguish between students if everybody is submitting at least one iteration of their draft through the AI? It seems like, yeah, how do you discriminate in terms of grades if they all kind of devolve to that mean?
Yeah, it's I still see, even though stuff is coming in maybe a little bit more polished, I still see a wide range of quality of what's being submitted. So I'm able to discern it still, I think. Now the writing I'm evaluating, however, I do teach intro to psych, and they do a little bit of writing in intro to psych. It's often sort of like we have two main writing assignments. One of them is very reflective, and that was actually one of the one of the few cases of AI cheating I turned in is someone doing a reflective thing, and they're talking about these high level therapy concepts that aren't in our textbook and aren't, I'm like, where'd you get this from? Oh, it's from AI, and that's one of the few places. But yeah, so the reflective stuff, I haven't noticed a lot of them using it. Some of them certainly have been, but not a lot. And so it's kind of just like, are they doing the assignment? And so that I haven't seen affected that much by AI. Um, but like being able to actually integrate things, ideas, and research. Um, yeah, I'm not, maybe I'm just not using it right, but I'm not convinced that ChatGPT can do something very specific like that I would evaluate positively. So I think there's still the ability to do the higher level stuff and synthesize ideas and do it in a way that's very specific to an assignment, like a thesis assignment. Uh, Man, if a student has mastered AI well enough to have me not notice it and be able to do that, then they're probably doing okay in terms of their academic abilities. Which is another philosophical question: is if a student goes through and does all their work using AI at the college level and doesn't get caught, man, I don't know what to think about that philosophically, because they are probably an extremely talented student if they're able to do that. It's really the low ability students that get caught and are not learning, I think. So
That's interesting. No, it sounds like you're tentatively sort of AI positive. You hear people say that, the loss of critical thinking is the main thing we have to be worried about. But I tend to favor more what you just said, is that those who can learn to use it well, will learn critical thinking skills, but on just playing a different game.
yes, I don't. Did they learn the critical, or do they have the critical thinking is hard,
Yeah.
right? So teaching it, it's very, in my mind, discipline specific. So there's certainly some cognitive power, right? So your intelligence level allows you to have more fluid intelligence to solve problems. But then if you are really good at solving problems in English composition or English lit, that doesn't necessarily translate to evaluating research. So yeah, so I think, I'm not sure if I am AI positive. But I do think that students need to learn the discipline specific conventions. And so, yeah, I'm not convinced yet, even something as simple as like formatting a paper and references in APA style. I have certainly had students try to do that with AI, and I don't think they're successful yet in doing it. Um, but you just have to kind of know what an APA style reference looks like to effectively tell AI what to give you. And it's just like you need to effectively kind of know how to interpret a psychological study in order to know what to get out of it to put in your paper. So I do think that there's just sort of skills that you just kind of have to know and learn. But from that point forward, once you have those basics, if you know how to use AI to give people what they want based on applying those and asking AI to do those things, yeah, it's I don't know if it's that outsourcing critical thinking. I don't know if that's outsourcing critical thinking or just critical thinking about how to do your critical thinking. It gets very sort of meta at that level. So it's almost like you're collaborating with someone rather than asking it to do, because you have to know something to know what to ask AI to do for you and to know whether what it's giving you is any good or not. And going back to what I said, if a student knows how to ask for something and to evaluate if it's really good, then they probably already know a lot. So they're just being more efficient in how they're getting to the end point.
Yeah, it seems there are times when trying to figure out what prompt I want to give to the AI helps me understand, really cut to the matter of like, what is it that I'm asking? what is it that I'm looking for? What kind of format do I want this in? What are some good examples of successful papers, successful written passages? And yeah,
Yeah,
I have found
what are
that.
your strategies? I don't know, I think you are way further ahead on the AI curve than I am. So what are your I find I
Mhm.
face the same thing. So how do you figure out when it's not giving you what you want? What is your strategy for getting what you want out of it?
Stream of consciousness is really good for me. Like just literally putting it on like the voice mode feature and just talking out my thoughts. And then, maybe as much as I'm capable of writing, be it bullet points, be it like, I want to say this, I want to say that, I know I want to say this, I know I say that, but they don't all quite come together in a cohesive argument. Can you help me like take this jumbled mess and kind of arrange it in a way that makes sense? And the more that you provide and, the more clearly you can articulate kind of your vision, the better the results are. And I don't know that that is a sacrifice of critical thinking necessarily. I could see the loss of technical writing ability, perhaps, because you don't have to learn to be as good of a technical writer to get kind of pretty good quality output. But yeah, being able to articulate what it is that you're looking for is really helpful.
Yeah, and that's something I struggle with a little bit is um, how much do am I okay letting students offload onto AI with just basic writing stuff? So if it I am not so AI positive that I'm okay with students putting like some like rough bullet points in that are even really intelligent, like great smart things and saying, give me a paragraph from that. I still am to the kind of AI cannot write your words for you. And I still am, I'm maybe coming around on this a little bit more, but in my syllabus, I still have that AI cannot write your outline for you either. Because to me, that's kind of the important thinking part of writing is getting the ideas in the right order. And that insight is kind of an important part of it. But yeah, that's a great point about the technical writing is, yeah, what's going to happen with the next, in 10 years? Will students come basically expecting to use AI to do some of the basic writing for them, in the same sense that they're expecting to be able to Google things or expecting to be able to, everyone uses a calculator analogy, but that's a good analogy, be able to use that to do basic math. So yeah,
Yeah,
things to think about.
I'd never fact checked it, but just got like a little blurb saying like China shuts down their, large language models during the finals week at university. It's like now
Hmm.
I'm not sure if that's true, but man, that would be the test. Put students in a room and say, go on, right.
Yeah. Well, I often, students don't like tests and quizzes.
Who does?
And I always, whenever they complain about it, I always say, well, we could go to the European model, which I don't know if Europe still does this, but this is what they did back in, when psychology started, is you can go to classes, you can not go to classes, and then at the end of the semester, there's exams, and you're just responsible for everything. And how you got there is your choice. And they universally hate that option. So, but yeah, I mean, I really think testing, and that's been sort of the discussion at my university as well, is maybe we're returning to more testing than we have been doing. So there was, I think, the pandemic, and switching to online remote formats, people is like testing almost became like, why are you oppressing students by making them take tests? And in that the assessment that I do in my classes, I have fairly objective evidence in my abnormal psych class that when they did not have in class closed book tests, they did not learn the basic content of that course as well. And I distinctly remember a student, I had them draw at the end of the semester after having open book tests, a concept map of everything we learned about the DSM, all the categories of disorders and the names of the disorders. And they just couldn't come up with anything. And the student's like, "Ah, we 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 learned all this stuff. We know all this stuff. We just can't remember it." And that's what, I think the key part of testing is allowing students to have that core set of knowledge that they can call on when they're doing their critical thinking later on. So in some ways, that's, I think, I don't have a problem with people moving that direction because of AI is having were closed book tests where they have to produce things because they have to know some stuff in order to be able to know what good stuff from AI is and what it should look like. So yeah, I'm that's true or not. It's an interesting idea.
I had a friend who she went to university in Rome, and yeah, she described what was it, the beginning of the year, the professor would hand you or a reading list of like three books, and he's like, you need to be responsible for everything in these three books. And as you said, you can come to lecture every week if you want to, but you don't have to, because he would just basically get up and read the content of the books aloud. And then at the end of the year, everybody has to show up one-on-one with that professor, and he has those three books in front of him. And she described that he would literally just be like, pick a random page of the book, read a little bit, and say, all right, keep going. And then he'd go to another book and just a random page of the book, pick a spot, read a bit, and say, all right, tell me about this. And that, I
Wow.
mean, that pressure, because you have no idea what he's going to ask you. I would imagine that you'd study pretty hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's I had exactly one, other than for my PhD, I had one class ever that was an oral exam at the end of the semester, and it was a test and measures class. And I think the only way that the teacher could do that is it was a very specialized course. There was like 10 of us in that class, and it was a one-on-one. And he basically did like a personalized, almost like item response theory test where he would ask you a question about reliability or validity or whatever. And if you got the first part right, he'd ask you a little bit harder question. And
Mm.
basically, he would go harder and harder and harder until he kind of cracked you and knew exactly where you were in terms of your knowledge from the class. And it was, uh, I was an older student, and I had that person, and I wasn't scared or whatever. But it definitely was an intense experience. But yeah, it's kind of, I think one of the things I think about AI, and I'm very open about my bias towards small schools. That's where I went to a pretty small school, liberal arts school, and I've chosen to teach at smaller schools. And I think there's educational advantages to that. And one of my maybe hopes is that, AI and is maybe going to cause people to want to be at smaller schools where they have more human interaction, both in class and with professors, and that it might actually bolster the respect that's given to degrees that come from small schools because there's a little bit more of the assurance that this person has done work that was not just generated by AI and is more than multiple choice tests and things like that. So I don't know if that will actually happen, but it's something that I see as a potential, maybe unintended consequence of education being influenced by AI.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I'd like to talk to you a bit about journals,
Sure.
submissions. Have you noticed any differences again these last 2, 3 years in the quality of the submissions or?
No, I haven't noticed any changes, and I probably do not have as good of a perspective because, as you know, I've been for the last almost 2 years, I guess, working pretty hard on getting the teaching of psychology special edition on AI out, and so I was basically reviewing and editing and working almost exclusively with people who were submitting stuff for that. So I'm now getting back into seeing more journal articles, but I haven't noticed anything with that at all. But that I'll admit that could entirely 100% be just the volume of things that I'm seeing. Um, Now, just going beyond the journals I work with. So the last academic conference I went to was at the Midwestern Psych Association, And so there were a lot of posters that were AI focused in terms of research topics. So, AI, posters are kind of like the canary in the coal mine. That's probably the wrong metaphor, but
No, yeah.
you see that the trends you see there are the trends you're going to see in journals in a year or two. So I'm expecting there to be a glut of just nonstop AI stuff about AI. But in terms of how people are using it for research, I'm sure there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff with that. And I know that there's a few psych science things that have popped up that I haven't had time to read yet. But yeah, that's the next question, right? It's got to revolutionize research. I think right now it's being used as a topic of research, but how it's going to be used. So, I'm thinking about doing a qualitative study based on student responses about how they used AI. So typically that means I sit down with another coder and we create a code book and all that good stuff. Well, why would I not just feed that into ChatGPT and just say, summarize the themes in this? And I don't actually know what people would say about that yet.
You do a side by side, yours and then ChatGPT's, and do a comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing that maybe scares me about AI in education is the hallucination problem. And it's just not, I would never submit something that I thought could possibly have a hallucination in it for a journal publication. And I'm not sure if there's 100% way right now to 100% ensure that there's no chance of that happening. Now, obviously, humans can make mistakes as well. And that's kind of how I try to think about it is you do anything yourself, you're going to make a mistake. AI makes mistakes too. But people know when you're using a computer, you don't expect it to have errors in it, right? Unless it's something you did as a human. But the hallucinations don't seem to be human errors, even though bad prompts might be more likely to get them. So I'll just give the example of the only kind of grading adjacent thing I do with AI right now is, again, the way I view AI is I try to offload the things I hate doing and think about ways to automate them. And so one of the things I always hated with those thesis papers as part of the grading is, do your references match up with your citations? And so for a decade of my life, every single one of those papers that would come in, I'd open up two versions of it and side by side do a check. And that's 10 minutes of my life for every single paper that I've ever graded, until I wrote a custom bot, ChatGPT, with instructions of how to basically do a check between the cited references, the citations in the text and the references. And it tells me which ones don't match. Works 90% of the time. 10% of the time, it misses or makes up errors. And I cannot figure out what is wrong in my prompt or if it's just sort of random hallucinations. So I'm not sure from a research standpoint if people who are using AI for research are getting access to some different higher level bot, or their programming that they're putting into it is so good that it's not going to have those types of errors. But yeah, that's something as an editorial and a reviewer that we're going to have policies for in the future, I think.
Yeah, what do those policies look like now? I mean, I'd say particularly in terms of the writing of the actual manuscript.
Yeah, I think everyone in psychology, I think, is following the APA as far as I know, in terms of basically saying that AI can't be a co-author, that it can't be writing the stuff for you. And so I'm okay with that for now, and I think that's probably appropriate for now in the near future. But I don't think there is any policy that corresponds to using AI as a methodological tool. So I am 100% certain that people are, using large language models to analyze text-based data, and that I'm sure that stuff has already been published. I just haven't seen it because that's not the type of research I really look at very much. But yeah, that's I don't think there is any policy about that. So it'll be interesting as people, as everyone has access to it, more researchers are finding ways to solve their problems using that.
Begs an interesting question about the replication because, these models are stochastic, probabilistic. And so you're not going to get the same exact result each time when you prompt it in an identical way.
Yep. Yep. And that's what I was thinking about with this qualitative stuff, right? This, not that two other researchers, you know, personally reading, the comments are going to come up with the exact same categories as me. But if I feed it in twice and don't get the same answer, yeah, I don't know what that means. It could be two valid answers just from slightly different perspectives. But yeah, I don't know if there's going to be some way to, yeah, because the wild thing about it is no one knows what any of this stuff is doing in the background anyway, not even the people who run it. Like it's just a bag of numbers. That's how I've heard it described, right? You have a bag of numbers, you shake it, and what comes out is whatever comes out. And they don't know how it's doing. It's surprising the people who AI is surprising the people who designed it. And so in terms of replicability, if it has inherent like randomness written into how it works, and that's how it works. Yeah, I don't know how you prompt it to not make hallucinations and errors based on that randomness. Uh, yeah, so that's beyond my programming abilities. But that's the cool thing about really the cool thing about AI is I'm sure you've heard the saying that English is the programming language of the future. Is that like you were saying, you can just put in some rough ideas and it'll spit out very polished, wonderful feedback for you, even if what you're putting in isn't perfect.
There's one professor I heard who he was talking through a clip of a movie in which an actor was playing Winston Churchill, dictating like a talk that he was going to give the next day from his bathtub, like to his secretaries. He was like, "Yes, and read it back to me." And she reads it. He's like, "No, no, 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 not like that. Keep going with this and add this." And she's just sitting there taking these personalized notes. And this professor's point was just like, we all have that now. How many of us have wanted to have just like this personal dictation tool that can summarize what we say, order it in these different ways, phrase it in different language? He's like, we all have that now, and we should be taking advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in my introduction to the special issue on AI, it's like what we don't know is the future of how this is how to play out, right? So we're gonna keep with kind of the big general models like ChatGPT and Claude and all this stuff, and they win because they were the first one in, and that's like they become the thing. They're the Google or the Facebook, right? Or is it just going to get integrated into our phones and our computers in ways that we have no choice about, where basically you don't you don't type a paper anymore. You just talk to Word, and Word, you say, here, Word, I'm thinking about writing an introduction. I'm going to cite this article, this article, this article, and it's just going to appear on your computer if you have the setting clicked to do that. Or is it going to be more like individual apps that, kind of like an iPhone type of thing? So, I feel a little bit conflicted, about how much time and effort to put into learning how to prompt AI and design, custom bots, because if my learning management system, Brightspace, all of a sudden comes with an amazing adaptive AI assisted tutor that reads my textbook and creates quizzes, why would I spend, 3 days of my life designing one right now? I guess I would learn from doing that. But yeah, so it'll be very interesting. And, that Pearson and Blackboard, all of these companies are desperately trying to figure out how to incorporate these things into our courses and our textbooks right now. And so it'll be really interesting in the future to see see how that pans out.
Was there anything else we might have left out that you'd like to talk on before we go?
I mean, we've been talking all business here, so I'm curious, AI for non-business purposes. I remember a talk that you gave at ACT. You were saying how you just go on a walk with your phone and have a chat with AI. Is that your main entertainment use of AI?
No, I mean, it's definitely great for that. I know a more recent use was my partner and I were having a disagreement. We're like, all right, we need a mediator here. So you put down the phone and you have it record the conversation, and you're like, all right, not so much who's right, but I think that is how we phrased it. It was like, all right, who won? Who's right? And it was just fascinating to, have both of our words broken down like that. And just that space of reading somebody else summarizing what you just said was enough for us both to kind of calm down and be like, all right, I see where you're coming from a little better. So I mean, just there's so many different ways to use it.
I mean, that's a couples therapy study right there. AI mediated disagreements. Absolutely. Now, I have my personal chat GPT knows I'm a professor, knows what kind of responses I want. So it wouldn't be fair for me and my wife to sit down and have a mediator be my chat GPT. We'd have to get a neutral one to help us out. Yeah.
I think
I had fun.
you can turn off those features, but you're right. You don't want
Yeah.
a biased
Yeah.
therapist.
Oh, I've never thought about it. Yeah, I guess you could just turn off your personalization. Um, the the most recent kind of fun I had is there's one that's find your celebrity
Uh-huh.
doppelganger.
Uh-huh.
And so I put my picture in, and it gave me basically some random bald celebrity, right? And there's another professor on campus who also has a shaved head, and I'm wondering, is this just going to give the same celebrity for everyone who has a shave, who's bald, basically? So went on the internet and put that professor's picture in, and it said, "Well, thank you for giving me another picture of yourself." So it didn't even recognize, and we don't look that much alike. So yeah, another AI improvement they need to make is better face recognition on that custom GPT, I guess.
It'll be interesting when these base models have all of those capabilities, because you can build a specialized model
Mhm.
for dedicated as facial recognition. But the day when ChatGPT itself is capable of doing all these things, that'll be an interesting day. Well, it's been great having you, Guy.
Yeah, thanks. It's lovely. I wish I could have. I felt like I talked too much. I wish I could have picked your brain a little bit more. But yeah, thank you. It was wonderful, and I look forward to future conversations. I know that you'll be doing this AI stuff for a long time, as will I. So we'll have lots to talk about in the future.
Thanks for listening to PsychSessions AI. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do like, subscribe, or leave a review. All of our episodes, as well as the PsychSessions newsletter, can be found by visiting psychsessions.org. See you next time.